Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network. All right, everybody, we are back, and I am joined by the one and only Dr. Vitra Gosine. Doctor, welcome back to the program. Nice to see you.
Thank you. Nice to see you too, Casey.
Doctor, you have a unique background in your studies and in your certifications. Can you tell the audience a little bit about what you do and about the duality, as I call it?
Yeah, so I'm basically both an integrative endocrinologist. So I'm an endocrinologist, physician, and I also, that is with my endocrinology practice. We also have LOTUS Life, which is the Center for Holistic Health and Conscious Living. And it's basically, again, involves integrative medicine, holistic health, where we really do focus on using a multidimensional approach in taking care of patients and taking care of health, meaning physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. So it truly is the only way that we can really take care of a whole human being.
Yeah, I'm so knocked out every time I talk to you because it's a very rare thing, isn't it? Usually you're one training or you take the other, but you got both backgrounds, which I'm sure comes in handy when you work with your clients, either way, right?
Yes, and I think we really need to just simply see that as a human being, we have many different aspects to us. And unless we're addressing the core issue, which is the core human being, you would see that health and disease many times are physical manifestations, most times, of what's going on internally. And unless we're not opening up or having that human conversation with patients, I think we're really missing the boat and we're putting band-aids on things and not really getting to the heart or source of the issue.
Gotcha. Yeah, and that's so accurate. So you'll work with people who are maybe diabetic, and then you'll see something else that an endocrinologist, I can never say the word, Mr. Producer, endocrinologist wouldn't usually see holistically. So putting that together is got to be just a great help for the clients that you help. I'm sure, right?
Yes, it's actually what I really enjoy. I mean, the best part of what I do every day is sitting and having these very sort of it comes down to be quite soulful, heart-to-heart conversations, while yes, I'm still analyzing medically what's going on. But unless I have this conversation, you'll be surprised how much we're missing. And sometimes we don't have a clear-cut answer in the numbers and the blood work and all the diagnostic testing I'm doing. But then you ask a little bit further, and then you see that something that person is going through mentally, emotionally, or even situationally at home, at work, is affecting either the numbers that you're seeing or analyzing, or one of the reasons why they may not be doing the things you ask them to do, but you have to find that out.
Right.
It's the only way we can actually solve, health problems.
You got a great topic today, and I can't wait to get into it. But just going on that, I have to ask you, have you ever seen, say, a diabetic? Have you ever treated them holistically for the diabetes and seen it regress? Does that ever once you have diabetes, is it over to type 2? Is that it? Do you always going to have it, or can you do things where you can reverse it? I think the audience would probably want to know that, and I do too.
Yeah, so I think the best way I can answer that question is you do have that ability up to a certain point in the disease process. It's a progressive disease. And so there are many factors that go along with it. As everyone knows, eating habits, exercise, maintaining an ideal body weight, things like that. But there are also things that affect blood sugars, stress levels that elevate stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline also contribute to these things as well. Clean eating in terms of, we talked about endocrine disrupting substances. Many chemicals in the environment can affect the pancreatic function. So the short answer to your question is yes, you do have quite a bit of control over that and bringing those blood sugars back into the normal range and keeping them there. with lifestyle changes. And by the way, 99% of what I see, it has to do with lifestyle choices, perspective, things like that.
Wow.
So you do have that control over a certain point in the disease process. But then what happens is after the beta cells in the pancreas start dying off, basically, then, or not functioning well, then you begin to have less and less control. So it depends on where you are in the disease process. So that's why we like to be aggressive and assertive, proactive is the word actually, in the pre-diabetic stages. Just when the blood sugars are a little bit off, that's when you have your best chance, and very early on in the disease process. But again, it's not just medically, it's everything. It's your perspective, how you handle stress, all of it.
It's holistic.
Yeah, it is. There's no other way. There really is no other way.
Well,
Yeah.
doctor, that's going to bring us into a great topic, which I'm so happy that you're going to talk about. I want to ask you a bunch of questions about how we're handling post-pandemic. You were just talking about stress levels.
Yes.
Some patients that you had before the pandemic, did you see them getting worse because of the pandemic? Can you tell me about your experiences?
Yes, we definitely had that with from everything, physically, mentally, emotionally. I think before we even talk about that, we have to understand what we've really actually been through. We don't realize how shell-shocked we are, myself included. I'm telling you, as a, having to deal with the masks and the whole, everything. We're not immune to that, especially as providers ourselves. But first of all, here are some of the stresses that whether some of us realize or don't realize that we're going through. Number one, the sheer fact that we have this pandemic brought to light, people's concerns, everyone across the board, of sort of life and death issues, meaning existential questions. You see this, you remember early on in the pandemic when we saw these makeshift morgues, things like that. I mean, this is a type of trauma that we have to acknowledge and actually not try to deny. It brings up existential questions for us. It brings up questions about our own mortality, our vulnerability to the harsh realities of life. These are things that obviously existed before, but given it with such intensity and mass, death that we were seeing,
it was a count on the TV every day. I mean,
of course, yes, this is as real as it gets. Not to mention the real physical health problems that we that people suffer, either short term, meaning people ending up on a ventilator, things like that, family members, close family members, friends, colleagues, as well as the long term effects. Remember, there, especially with some of the earlier variants, and it's still ongoing with the long term effects in terms of memory, effect on the heart, different organ systems. So you're looking at now family members having to take care of, other family members with these long lasting effects of COVID. The financial instability, loss of income, the exponential rise in the cost of living, it brings up the question of, oh my goodness, this is a threat to our survival. How are we actually going to survive? And, when you talk about basic needs like, shelter, meaning having a home to live in, clothing, food, the cost of food, these are the most fundamental basic things of just physical survival. Yeah. This is huge. This is not something we're used to, especially in this country where, we have abundance, and when scarcity, this concept of scarcity of I am not enough or there is not enough, that is fear provoking, anxiety, depression, and none of us are immune to it. Even myself at the beginning of this, it was, how should I put it? Like somebody pulled the floor out from under my feet, a paradigm shift. It's like your entire world shatters and you're now having to question. We didn't even understand the pandemic in the beginning.
Right.
So you can see the impact of that. It is, we are actually living sort of a PTSD thing. Some of us may be in denial, but that's the fact.
Well, especially as someone who does what you do. I mean, you're taking care of people, and that's your job, and you're trained to do that. And now something comes along, and did you think that we got all the right information? Did we handle it correctly? Were you guys, maybe
Well,
that's a whole nother way we want to get into, but I'm saying
yes,
as a doctor and helping people,
yes,
it sometimes was a stress even more because at times I'm sure that we had never been through, you weren't
no,
alive in
no,
1917, right? I mean, you
yes,
never
with the
been through this.
Spanish flu, yes,
So was
yes,
it extra stress for a doctor?
yes, extra, and it's funny that during that time, actually just before that started, my mom was actually ill. She had kind of gotten out of the hospital just before that influx of patients,
Thank God.
later on in 2020. And I remember a couple of times she's had some hospitalizations. I was actually talking to some of my colleagues at the hospital that I'm on staff at. And I'm telling you, those people and even myself with patients coming in and just seeing the mass effect of this, the sheer deep human impact, that it really shook them to the core. I mean, they were, I don't want to use the word in a sense, different people, but that's the only way I can put it. Of course, it'll take some time to come out of that. All they're seeing is death. They were looking at my ICU colleagues, for example, family members who lost patients dying without even being able to see their family members. This is
Oh my
this
God.
is deep, big stuff, big stuff. And I think I think we are in and about to have a mental health crisis, not just from basically from everything that I've just said,
Yeah.
from the human part of it to what we've dealt with. And we're seeing it, even the social isolation was a huge
Isolation.
factor
Yeah.
from, schools, school age, kids, teenagers. It's huge. It had an effect on relationships as well at home because it changed dynamics. There were people who were now working from home. There was some friction there because, everyone is trying to, do their thing, whether the kids are in school online, parents are trying to work from home. It really disruptive our normal social fabric.
Yeah. And what I mean, we're probably not even going to know for a long time, but um, right right away, and looking at it now, how do you think that the kids were affected more? I mean, I know that there was 2 years of juniors and seniors that missed out on things that a kid that age should go through. I mean, to the first time, you take a girl out or a guy out, or
Yes.
the prom, or a sporting, a whole 2 years were lost. I mean, what's the effect on those kids? You think they might have had
Yeah,
it worse?
I think the elderly were really socially isolated there, especially people in nursing homes, people who don't have family members. And definitely, I would say the school age kids, but especially the those teenager years. And you're right, because those are very important milestones in their life
Right.
that can never be recovered.
Yeah.
And it's huge. It is huge. That lack of interaction. And I always say on my podcast, in previous podcasts that we've had, we're neurobiologically wired for connection,
Yeah.
real human connection, not just sort of the, social media likes kind of thing. I mean, genuine human connection. We need to see each other. I mean, when you see someone, if you text someone versus email versus seeing them face to face or over video, whatever it is, you could, our response is different. We can read emotions, we feel that connection, and that was really missing. So to answer your question, yes, it's affected them because major milestones were lost that we can't get back. um it is what it is, but this is far from over because we're beginning to see, and the financial impact itself, limits a family or a parent's ability to maybe, provide in a way, not just needs, but the sort of wants as well that would go along with, providing the best life that a parent can for their child, and it's hard. It's a really hard thing. And we're seeing it. For me, it was, wearing the masks, consistently. By the end of the day, my glasses is like fogged up. I
Yeah.
can't breathe. I mean, you're just not yourself. And it's, under these conditions, day after day after day. And we're what, in year 3 now of this?
Yeah.
And it's, the threat, not just with this pandemic, I'd like to add, if you take now what's going on in our country and in the world from natural disasters to political to all these issues, add that up. And I don't think, as far as I can remember in my lifetime, we've been under this level of stress.
Right.
I really don't think, at least I can't remember that.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. You know, if you would have told me, 10 years ago that would be our reality, I wouldn't believe it. I would think that's just something that you read in a story or something like that. I'm with you. As far as you mentioned, I thought you were right on to something. No one's thinking about what's happened to us mentally, and how that it really is affecting people, because some people are still isolating even though things are opening up. They're used to living
Yes.
a certain way, right? Have you seen this?
Yes, I actually had some of my patients who I really had to like really be able to get into my office. I mean, we're seeing people in the office. Obviously, we're really strict about the mask thing, only because it's a doctor's office, and
Right.
you have immunocompromised patients, so we have to be mindful of that. We still do telemedicine visits as well, when I don't physically have to see them. But yes, we're still seeing some people, there is one thing to be protective and take all the precautions. There's a whole other thing where it was almost to the point where the level of paranoia, and that itself is mentally unhealthy, because it prevented them from, the other crisis, by the way, which brings me, is that healthcare was delayed, meaning that a lot of their usual visits and things like that. So it is causing now another physical health crisis, not just mental health crisis, because all your, usual screening tests and all those things were postponed.
Yeah.
And now they're trying to catch up, health wise. Yes, it is it's a problem that's just been compounded by everything else that's going on. Yeah.
As you see, I mean, the different variants, and I guess I'll just throw it out there. I mean, as far as the COVID and whatever other variants, are we out of the woods with that, do you believe, or is that another thing that we just don't know yet?
So I'm not an infectious disease expert. However, I'm not an epidemiologist or public, health official who, keeps aware of, the numbers and, in detail. But I can say that, I guess we were seeing initially the sort of the strains that were really causing severe issues. Since then, we've had, the vaccinations, the boosters, which are at least, helping with the severity of the illness, decreasing the incidence of death, hospitalizations. So while that sort of is toning down, we're getting though more aggressive, what we call transmissibility. Like basically, they're more easily transmitted. The viruses. Maybe we're a little bit better protected, or they're not as severe with the variants we had early on. But then again, we were also unprepared as well. So all these things must be taken in consideration. We're overall, I think, moving in a positive direction, to answer your question. But now we're getting strains that are just simply, they're more easily transmitted.
Yeah.
And then you have the issue with monkeypox and all these other things. So it's as if, I think that's the other part of the stress, is as if we can't catch our breath in between these things.
Great way to put it. Yeah.
Yeah, that is the stress as well. It's one thing to go through certain levels of stressful periods and things like that, but this is a global issue. Doesn't matter where you're from, what socioeconomic status you are, it is a universal global issue we've been dealing with for the last few years. But it seems as though we also need to be able to catch our breath in between. And if, as one thing is waning, another threat is coming. And I think that perspective of being under constant threat raises, our stress hormone levels. It changes sort of our perspective. And which brings me to the point of, how are we going to be dealing with all of this? How do we handle this, in the first place? And one of the things that, I say, or I try to practice is, listen, there is no denying that this is happening. That's the first thing. First thing is to acknowledge this is real. The effect is real. and it may be affecting us in ways that we may not really fully be aware of. You want to, simplify life, like for the people who have been dealing with really hard financial issues, you know, really focus in on the basics. I mean, the cost of living, of food, of basic things, of rent, of those things are really harsh. I mean, I don't have a magic wand to move all that away, but the thing is, keep bearing in mind that at least a few times during the day, take time for what I call the pause, maybe, taking a deep breath, just bringing yourself back to, just being in a little bit more relaxed state. You may not be able to change, obviously, the circumstances, but maybe whatever we can or whatever is humanly possible, our response to it, and it's a hard reality. Also, taking time for, clarity, for just, finding again your meaning and purpose in life. This pandemic caused people to reevaluate what really matters in the end.
Yeah.
How exactly you want to live now, the rest of your life. These are big changes that are happening. Take some time to clear your head on hot space, that space. And basically in doing so, that gives us a little bit of firmer footing, because we feel like we've been knocked off our feet.
Yeah.
So a firmer footing, a little bit more stability of a foundation, and then focus on relationships, the people we were not able to see or things, to have that connection. Because when things get tough, sometimes that's all we have left.
Yeah.
Our connection with ourselves and with the people that really matter in our life.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the only way I think some kind of redirection, foundation, maybe, sort of healing and things like that, fulfillment can come in. Focus on the things that bring you joy while you're trying to rebuild your life, on a very practical, everyday level, but you first have to anchor yourself.
Yeah.
That's kind of the thing. And sometimes we need to help each other with that, because sometimes we lose focus, myself included. We're all human.
Right.
So
Yeah.
those are the things.
It's great information, and I think you're right on. And I wanted to ask you, how did your patients, as far as I know there was a lot of as you talked about, the isolation, the anxiety. A lot of people stayed home. I'm sure a lot of them didn't eat as well as they could have. Did you see a rise in sedentary lifestyles? Pre-diabetic became diabetic. Have you seen a lot of that in the office?
Yes, for two reasons. For the same reason you described, and also, stress, the stress levels. Yes. So,
cortisol you talk about, right?
Yes, a lot of that stuff. And there are a few people who, because they had the time at home, they exercise more, but those were in the minority. The majority was really, I could have seen, I know you can't see much, obviously when the mask is covering your face and they're in front of me, but, I can see that sort of drawn down, look from the stress of everything that's going on. So yes, worsening of certain conditions. Number one, again, because of that sedentary lifestyle. Number two, because they themselves, kind of held off on following up. People who kind of ran out of their medications or postponed certain visits, which it happened probably, across the board.
Yeah.
But yes, we did see that. Now, though, I think we're in a much better place in terms of what I'm seeing. But the constant threat of, constantly having to take precautions, it's there.
Right.
It's there.
Yeah, doctor, I really appreciate you speaking so candid with me and the audience. I'm sorry I didn't get to everybody. I know we had a bunch of people that wanted to ask questions. We'll get to them next time. But doctor, let me give you the floor here for some final thoughts on such a great topic that we needed to hear. And I'm with you on that mental thing. I'm in 100% agreement with you. We got to really be careful about looking for something that happened. But let me give you the last word here.
So, I just think that in summary, number one, I think maybe we actually need to take some time to be honest with ourselves. And I think a lot of times it's just we were so basically focused, not that people are not doing it intentionally. It's just we were so focused on fighting for our survival They just didn't have the space or the time or the luxury of time while they're trying to survive physically, provide for their family. So, that's a reason that they haven't even processed or even aware that, wow, this is really affecting me. So take some time to sort of figure that out. And once we recognize this, then, keep up with the, visits with your health, whether it's emotional, physical, mental, spiritual, whatever that is. And, simplify your life, sort of try and figure out what really matters and what's working for you. What do you need in your life? And work towards that. I mean, there's we are still under the threat of everything that I described with what's going on in the world and the pandemic and everything else. But all we can do is, do the best, like I always say, with what we know at the moment. But it's all about cultivating self-awareness.
Yeah.
When you're self-aware, the solutions sort of come naturally.
Gotcha. How do we get a hold of you, doctor?
So Lotus Life, the Center for Holistic Health and Conscious Living, the best way would be through our website, or everything, all our services, everything is there. And the website is www.mylotus.life.
Awesome. Thank you so much for a great show, and can't wait to hear what you have to say next. Dr. Vitra Gosine, everybody.
All right.
We'll be right back. Thank you, doctor.
Are you looking for even more of the podcasts and hosts that you love? The Podcast Business News Network is proud to announce that you now have even more ways to listen live. Check out the MyTuner Radio, online radio box, and Simple Radio apps on iOS and Android, or find us online. Search for Business News Network on mytuner-radio.com, or search Podcast Business News Network on streama.com and onlineradiobox.com/US. Take your podcast on the go and don't miss a minute of the action.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, I mean, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
Mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house. And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned. This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.